All right, we just scrape in at the end of the week. It's Sunday. Couple more days, Martin. 16th of June. I would have been in Auckland 2 years. That's gone real quick. Of course, we started off making this podcast back in Wellington probably 7 or 8 years ago. So I don't think we ever thought we'd be in the sort of situation we are in now, with all sorts of crazy things happening. COVID-19, obviously. Now, people protesting and creating independent territories within major US cities. It's all in the heart of the commercial airliner capital of the world. It's crazy times. But anyway, here we are doing our podcast using this Zoom service. I'm here in the bunker in Auckland. You, well, it's hard to say where you are. You're obviously somewhere where there's a light.
In way behind me in the distance. I'll actually show you where I am. I will rotate the. There you go. I'm standing in the middle of a deserted road up near a cell tower, and I got the load lights on the tray. Yeah. And there's the old ute, and yeah.
Well, it does the trick.
Those are the lights of Roma in the background.
Who needs a fancy set with studio lights and robot cameras when you've got the lights on the back of the ute and, not much traffic in the background and the town off in the background? I mean, it's the new way of broadcasting. Anyway, I don't know where to start and how we connect aviation with everything that's happening, except to say, obviously, there are not too many people traveling between countries at the moment. I think there's been a bit of news here the last week or so of movie people and wealthy people managing to get into New Zealand, I guess in quarantine, but probably quite luxurious quarantine. There seems to be some favourability towards people who make movies at the moment, and I guess next it'll be the international students coming back because the university business model relies on it. So I just wonder if that'll start to knock a few people, whether they'll start to think there's preferential treatment in travel.
Well, there is preferential treatment in travel, so they better get ready to get angry.
Yeah. But then you've got to be pragmatic. Business has to continue, and New Zealand can make money out of Hollywood or movie people making movies here. So, and you can't let the universities fall over. So it's just pragmatic policy, really, isn't it? I suppose in the end, even if people don't like it or feel that they're, second class to it.
Well, I think you could modify that old saying: "The road to hell might be paved to pragmatism," actually, or paved with pragmatism.
Yeah. Well, the one point of crossover I could see here with some of the cultural stuff going on at the moment is that with the green thing infused in there somewhere as well, that I think there will be an ongoing demonization is probably too much of a strong word, but discouragement of any fossil fuel burning travel, and air travel I think is possibly going to be have a shaming element to it in the future, unless alternative fuel and non-polluting propulsion becomes every day.
Well, and that's despite the fact that air travel in terms of your energy barrel is a relatively low user, and things that some people probably think are quite ecologically sound, like those supersized cargo ships. They are huge users of the energy barrel and by far the biggest polluters. So, yeah, I don't think reason will enter into the argument because, yeah, it's easy to identify aeroplanes leaving airports, but they're actually not a big user of oil.
Yeah, but it's seen maybe as a privileged thing, travel, especially holiday travel.
Yeah, I guess you got to find a reason to get up in arms about something, and that seems a good enough reason as any.
Yeah, but there are people in countries around the world that depend on that sort of business. We do. It's I think pretty well a third of the GDP of the economy, which is still down. But there are apparently quite a few airline pilots now doing shopping for countdown delivery and things like that. Virtual shoppers, or what the people that will go and shop for you on your behalf.
And also pickers and packers and drivers and all this type of thing.
They're so overqualified for the job. It's incredible.
Yes, and along those lines, I was reading a piece, I think it was in Flight Global. They were saying that the big problem with all these furloughed airline pilots, so pilots that haven't actually been let go, they've been furloughed from their airline, and so they're still allowed to use the airline facilities to stay current. There's not enough simulators.
Oh,
So
wow.
you've got 2,000 pilots all queuing up for the simulators now, whereas previously, obviously, they're getting their time in the plane. Now they've got to keep their hours up. They can't fly the plane, and there's not enough simulators to keep them current.
And maybe we can talk a bit more about that. It'll come into the picture again with the, inevitable, I guess it's inevitable, return to service of the MAX and all the training that has to be done depending on what has been updated. I mean, if it's software update, is there much training involved in that? If they can get it flying just like the, let's talk about it now, the NG or whatever, the legacy version, then how much training needs to be done?
Well, it'll be that because it fundamentally doesn't fly like the NG. You'd have to train them for when that software stops doing its NG thing.
Right.
So what happens when it all goes to hell in a handbasket? Then they've got to know what to do.
It seems to have taken a hell of a long time to sort out what it sounded like, what I've read, what are software updates. I mean, how long does it take to write lines of code?
Well, I also think I must admit I haven't looked into the MAX thing for a couple of months now, but I believe they do have to add the second sensor. They do have to add in this case, there'll be a third computer to arbitrate between the two flight data sensors. So there's a fair bit of work to do. They've also got to go through all the planes and tidy up all the bad, the frayed wiring and the deburred edges that they found during their inspections. So there's quite a lot to do, and I'm sure they've been doing that now while the planes are all parked. Then they've got to go and install all the software and then test fly all those planes. How many are there? There'll be a couple of hundred sitting around.
Yeah.
So, and each test flight will be an hour or two.
From what I read, they're expecting this to happen at the end of this month, only a few weeks away. So we should have some big announcement. I understand that there's an FAA test pilot and a Boeing test pilot that conduct these final tests. I guess they'll be trying to make gosh, I've even forgotten what the system's called now. It's been so long since we mentioned it.
MCAS.
The what?
MCAS.
Oh, the MCAS. That's right. MCAS. That's right. They're going to try and trick it every which way into operating badly, are they? Is that the...
Yeah, and I guess they'll turn it off. And I guess they'll turn off one of the air data sensors and make sure that it goes over to the other one. And they've got to test everything.
Yeah.
And I don't think they'll have to test that for every single subsequent flight, but the early flights of the production representative aircraft will be very heavily, all failure modes will, you hope, one hopes, will be tested.
I wonder if there's been any...
And then after that...
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted.
Carry on.
I was going to say, I wonder...
The
time frame, you wonder if there's more than just software. Maybe they've had to do some airframe changes as well, maybe something to do with the way the engines are located. There's been no talk of that, but it just seems to have been a hell of a long time to sort out software.
Yeah, I doubt they can't have made any airframe changes. They might perhaps be changing some of the rigging, the ratio, how the controls respond, and all that type of thing.
It's not fly by wire; it's still cable, isn't it?
Still cable, but you can change the mixers and all that type of thing on there.
Yeah,
yes. No, I think it's just taken them a long time because the FAA will have been all over them and doing, software code audits and all this type of thing. I mean, it's been 14, 15 months?
A long time. Wow.
It's a crazy long time.
Yeah. Yeah, to be in suspension while your competitor is going hammer and tongs. Is that the expression? Hammer and tongs?
That is the expression indeed, yeah.
All right. Well, it'll be interesting in a few weeks to see what happens there. Also with Boeing, I see that the future of the 747 up in the air again. I think they've got 45 to deliver between now and the end of 2021, and they've got parts of those. But to carry on, they've got to find a new supplier of fuselage parts.
Yeah, that's a big call, hey. And a lot of people are quite animated about the fact that the 747 this that might be coming to an end. I mean, it'll be a great shame, but all good things come to an end, I suppose, at some stage.
Well, I see that it does 134 tons full load, and the 777F is 104 or something. So it's still quite a bit of extra capacity, a big leap. If you take it out of the equation, what have you got left? Well, all those A380s might come into the picture then as logical conversions. And most of them might end their years as freighters yet.
Yeah. No, there's 16 outstanding 747-8s to go.
Oh, okay.
And they only sold 47 passenger planes, and they've sold 106 freighters.
Okay, so I don't know. I got that wrong. I beg your pardon, but that's not many, eh? Not many.
So there's 3 to Volga Dnipro. They are still shown as outstanding, although they'll probably never get done.
Those are the ones going to UPS that we talked about last week.
Right. And UPS has 13 on order, and so there's probably 10 left to go, really. And that'll be the end of it.
Coming right down to the wire.
It certainly is.
Yeah, 50 years, though. Boy, that's a long time.
And of course, you've got the Air Force 1 and 2 or whatever they're going to be called. They'll be flying for a good long time yet.
Oh yeah, they'll all fly for a while for sure, but to not have them produced after all these years. I mean, when you compare the 100 with what it is now, it's amazing, really.
Yes, it is amazing.
The other thing too is I remember reading the Joe Sutter book again on the 747, and he and all his colleagues and peers were absolutely crazy about redundancy. They put redundancy in everything. 747 had 4 hydraulic systems, just over the top, and that philosophy came from in the war, being with equipment in the war, that if it failed once, you're basically dead, because of the standard of the speed of that production had to be done, design production. So they swore they wouldn't be like that. The fact that 737 MAX flew with only one sensor feeding the system shows you that they'd lost all that concept, that earlier concept of redundancy. That's so flaky. That was so flaky.
Well, that's when accountants run an engineering company.
Yeah, now, you can see
it really is.
You can see the diff.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. So back home, Air New Zealand, they're going to be starting flights to Japan soon. Nice. There's talk of capital raising, though that $900 million loan facility from the government. The first $600 million is 7 to 8%, and the $300 million is 9% interest. It's quite expensive money.
That's crazy. Why would the government, as the major shareholder, do that to their own asset?
I'm looking at the Stuff website, and it's being reported as of, it's the 11th of June, a few days ago. And that's how they've broken it down in the article by John Anthony. I thought that kind of sounded like a rip-off when, you've got the Reserve Bank and its cash rate at 0.25%.
Yeah, that sounds a little bit extortionate, actually, and no wonder Air New Zealand wants to raise capital, because the last thing they want to do is draw down that loan, right? Or they want to pay it back as soon as possible.
Do you get the feeling sometimes that and all government help, there are always sort of officious, if this is true, and it's being reported, so you assume the guy's done the reporting the right way, but there's sort of like officious sort of straitjacket conditions all the time. Like the criteria is always difficult for the average business to get itself into. There's always, rules and caps that make it, difficult to access or whatever. I mean, why would you charge that sort of interest rate to a company that you own more than half of, when you can get money at virtually 0% of interest?
Well, except the airline probably can't, because it's a really bad risk. So although the interest rates are low, the financial institutions maybe don't want to loan it to them, because...
Yeah, but that's the government.
But again, but again, and yes, I know. So the government said, okay, we'll be the lender of last resort, but we're going to rort you for it. But on the other hand, a financial institution could have lent Air New Zealand money, would have probably lent Air New Zealand money at a slightly lower interest rate because, hey, you're 52% owned by the government, so you're never going to fail.
They're always going to come running.
Yeah,
well, they haven't access to money yet, so it hasn't happened. But if they do, that's what it's going to cost.
Yeah, I reckon they won't.
Yeah. Well, if
they'll do
raise capital from shareholders and so forth, that'd be cheaper, wouldn't it?
Yes. Yeah, and also perhaps having that money in the background, should they ever need it, is also a bit of a security blanket for whoever might lend them money. So I'm pretty sure they'll raise the capital and they won't have to pay the government any interest. But yeah, why didn't the government just give it to them at 2.5%, 3%? They'd have still made money.
Yeah. I mean,
but again, they probably drive. It's like everything else governments seem to do these days. They're trying to drive everyone into the arms of the banks.
Good point.
Don't get me started.
No, well, yeah. Well, you wonder. I mean, the COVID-19 is one thing on the economy, but this sort of dissatisfaction that seems to be coming through with the current order of things may also be a problem for business for a while, globally, once this thing's over, because there seems to be quite a bit of dissatisfaction and unrest out there.
There is dissatisfaction, and it's always a bit, well, not alarming. It's always interesting when the middle classes get satisfied, and a lot of people I talk to here, the government here is offering quite cheap loans to self-employed people, and you can take out some of your super fund and all this type of thing. When you speak to people, they say, oh, I've just got my 25 grand from the government, blah blah blah, and you're like, okay, well, what are you going to do with it? Oh, I'm going to pay off my credit card. And I've spoken to numerous people and say, oh no, I'm going to pay. Sorry?
That goes to the banks.
Yes, but what's happened is the Royal Commission here in Australia, in response to the Royal Commission, the banks really came down hard on lending, and so people couldn't get money. But what the banks then did, and I wonder if there'll be an inquiry into this. What they did is they went to people and said, "Oh no, we can't lend you any money." But then mysteriously enough, 2-3 weeks later, an application would arrive. They could increase their credit card limit,
21% or whatever.
21%. So the banks wouldn't lend them any money at 3-4%, but they were happy enough to increase their credit card limit by 20 grand. And people were like, well, I need to pay the school fees, I need to do this, I need to do that. So a lot of people here are carrying a lot of credit card debt, which is, it's understandable, right? And so now this government, the government has given giving a lot of people these cheap loans, and people are beginning to openly wonder whether this is not the government getting back at the banks for not lending the money in the first place, and it's all part of this Royal Commission, because the government and the banks are basically having a slow motion argument about who's really in control of the economy, and of course it's the banks think they're in control of it.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, yes. It seems to me that if you're going to just saddle people with more debt, what's the point? I mean, okay, even if it's a low interest loan, it's just more debt. It has to be paid back. Why not just give them the damn money and be done with it? If it's spent in the economy, though, is it being spent in the economy when it's used to pay off credit card debt? Who ultimately ends up with that?
Well, this is the thing. Well, the banks won't be too happy about that, because you're basically refinancing a high interest loan with a low interest loan. So the banks will lose a lot of money, right? Because you'll pay off your credit card and you won't be paying the interest. So, but in regards to simply granting the people the money, well, that just goes against the words of the high priests of economic orthodoxy. You just can't do that, Paul. You've got to, because we're all, sort of in 19th century mercantilism. We should all work hard for our money. I understand it's very difficult to get, and we should all suffer if we make a mistake.
Except the huge non-fail businesses, like your airlines and things like that, or whatever, or the arts sector, you get given huge money to
or bureaucrats.
You can't have the nutrient stream interfered with, Martin.
No. But yes, no. We should talk about other things, because I'll end up just getting angry again.
Well, we don't want that. But one of the interesting things is that you could say that this sort of discontent does seem to run parallel, I think, if you want to boil it down to anything, and that is basically housing.
Yes. So although, for example, Australia and New Zealand over the last 20, 30 years have become, and I'll do this, richer, the average person is by many measures has a higher standard of living, but the number of hours spent per year to pay for housing has gone up, and housing is now the most expensive item on or the most expensive part of anybody's paycheck, whereas it used to be food. But of course, by tying rates and everything to your rateable value, you've allowed it. There's been a massive expansion of local government who's interested is only to keep the price of. I mean, it's this whole pyramid scheme about increase the value of your home. So when later on, when the kids have left or whatever, and you then sell the home and downsize with enough money in the bank that you don't get any. If you're in a country with a means-tested pension and everything, you then only get the minimum pension. It actually saves the state a whole lot of money. You end up paying for your aged care once you reach that stage, because you've got assets in the bank and they won't pay you until you've used up your assets and all this type of thing. And it's led to this whole thing, investment homes, and it's created a completely pumped up artificial housing market, which everyone is, well, not everyone, but governments see no way out of that now. I mean, what are you going to do? Crash the housing market? I mean, it's happened in countries in Europe where people just said, you know what, in the 80s, or late 70s, to hell with it. We're not buying houses. We're just going to rent. And it ended. It was just like all over. The housing boom was done, and people rent. But
even renting's a problem, because it seems to me the supply is constrained no matter what. So even finding rental options becomes difficult, because you need to have a net tight supply to basically keep the squeeze on the values.
Yes, and so in Europe, when this happened, obviously, because there was a housing shortage, the government stepped in. Didn't step in directly. What it did is it let people create housing associations. Remember the old building societies?
Yep.
And so these building societies got special sort of laws where they could go off and build houses for cost and rent them out for cost, and that it built a lot of houses very, very quickly. But they only did that once the housing bubble had popped. Maybe they should do that and pop the housing bubble. But it's a hell of a call to make, especially in the Anglo sphere, as some people call it, where property is become central to the creation of wealth. Owning a home is a way of life, and it's seen as an aspirational thing to do. I mean, I know people here who you could buy, and it's kind of crazy. So you could, in the close inner suburbs of Brisbane, Cinnamon Park, places like that, you can actually buy a reasonable house, but it's 10, 12 years old. For the same price, you can buy a new GJ Gardner home 45 k's further out. And I know two people who have bought the house 45 k's further out because it's new. They didn't want to buy a second-hand house in town. And it's a marketing thing, and you get a bit of a deal, and they give you a big TV and a new kitchen and so all this type of thing. And you just say, geez, you poor saps, you've got an extra 90 k's there and back. You could have lived 4 k's down the road in an older house. Yes, in a bit a good suburb, everything's nearby, but it's got this whole cachet of a new home in a new suburb, and it's just a pyramid scheme. It really is. And if you've got a whole bunch of people, the current generation and maybe one or two others, who don't actually really own anything in the society, particularly property or a first home or something that establishes families, things like that. If you feel that you don't have a stake in it, and you can never have a stake in it because it's so the dice is so rolled against you, then you're probably not going to care about getting out there and wrecking a few things and doing a bit of looting and pulling some statues down and fixating all the things that you never liked into this sort of moment. That's what you get. Or you get general dissatisfaction, and maybe this is an indication of the. I mean, I think the current unrest is a combination of people feeling they've really got not much to lose, and also they've been cooped up inside for 3 months. So hey, let's go out there and raise hell because we're bored. Fair enough.
Well, apparently, a second wave is these things peak, and 1 or 2 days in the news cycle of them waning. Now we've got the next fear-generating story, and that is second wave of COVID-19 coming to a city near you.
I think a lot of people will be very disappointed if there's not a second wave of COVID-19 because they will be proven wrong again.
Well,
yes. Anyway.
I can't see there being another lockdown. I don't think the public would buy. I don't know if they would buy it. Some would, but maybe not as committed as the first time round, let's say.
In the UK, sounds like, I speak to my sister quite regularly. She lives over there. I mean, that place sounds like a complete basket case. It's got a huge government sector. It's got one of the most expensive healthcare systems in the world, and they've completely stuffed the whole thing. Now, looks like her daughter's only going to go back to school in 2021.
Wow!
Right? Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So this year, they're working through the options now. There might be a plan where each year group goes into school for 1 or 2 afternoons a week, but they're not sure. And they basically said, worst case, 2021 is when school will start again. Their son, my nephew, he goes to a slightly smaller school, and he will be going to school for 3 afternoons a week, for 6 hours a week, basically, 2 hours in the afternoon, because they're keeping the class sizes really small so they can keep the 4 square meter rule, and they're going to rotate them in through the day and through the week. And England has just completely bungled it. Yes.
Is it my impression? Anyway. I don't seem to, before I used to see in the platforms I visited quite a bit of Boris Johnson. I don't see the guy in public so much. I don't know if that's because those platforms aren't carrying his content anymore. He's being sort of like selectively, what do they call it, shadow banned or whatever. He's lost his effectiveness. You would think with these protests going on that you really need the leader of the country. Maybe he's been doing it. I don't know. But he needs to be standing up and being quite forceful about what's acceptable and what's not, because, of course, the great unwashed out there in the towns and cities of the UK that voted to leave the European Union and have maybe a more traditional view of what it is to be English and what the country stands for and their history, and they're not hanging off every Twitter word, are watching this and expecting some sort of leadership. I just wondering if they're getting it right now,
Well, I expect he's pretty busy, A, wondering why his government's so useless, and B, end of June's the end of the EU, right? So I bet there's a hell of a lot going on there as they try and sort out their actual exit strategy.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. Well, but that's not being reported. Well, in that case, it's kind of not being reported. In fact, there's
there's nothing to report, really, is there? Yeah.
Anyway, so, okay, well, its effect on, there is an effect on what we like to talk about, and that is the industry has been so stopped in its tracks, and there's no obvious, they keep talking about until a vaccination is found, in terms of opening up borders. That may never happen. It's not happened for the common cold. I believe that's a coronavirus version of a coronavirus.
Exactly.
What happens if you never find a vaccine? How long do you go in that mode?
Maybe they won't find a vaccine, or as some people say, because it's similar to the common cold. You might get a vaccine for this particular strain, but it might only last for a year or 2 or 3 until it changes again. But I think what's going to happen is going forward, there's going to be a lot more. I don't think it'll be particularly obtrusive, but if the airports start sampling, let's say, 3 people off every flight and getting a swab and taking their temperature and just monitoring. If you do you do a proper designer statistical a test, and you calculate proper sample sizes, and that there'll be very few people that actually need to get tested. Should be easily manageable by an airport. But I think we'll have that for the next 5 to 10 years. If we don't have that, I'd be wondering what the hell they think they're going to do, because that really, for international travel, is really the only way you can do it, is take a few people aside from every flight, swab them, get their details, and move them on. Hell, I wouldn't mind giving blood if I had to, because if the test is properly designed, that maybe 20 people a day would be enough.
Yeah.
But and I think they probably should do that. And it would be, like I said, it wouldn't be particularly obtrusive. It would just be a thing you get used to. And if you travel a lot, it might happen twice in a lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. There must be a limit to how much you're prepared to take risk-wise to the absolutely cooling effect it has for maintaining civilization.
Yes, and I think cooler heads and wiser heads will prevail, and they should come up with a properly designed test regime, do it, and then people can just get back to normal doing it as what they want to do. And if that's toppling down statues and throwing them in the river, go for it.
I see Alice Springs has come into its own for aircraft storage. It's sort of becoming like one of those US desert storage locations now. And I think, there's some whole bunch of A380s there. Silk Air, I think, have put their 737 fleet there, and Qantas are putting stuff there. Virgin Australia, it's quite a scene at Alice Springs. And it's only recent.
Yeah. They interviewed the guy not long ago who set it up, and it was his dream to set it up in Australia. And good on him. It's just, it's quite far for people to come and store their airplanes.
Yeah, but I guess if the atmosphere is the atmospherics are good, then you save money in the long run.
Yes, no, absolutely. It's a perfect place, but but it is quite a long way, and given Australia, it's going to be expensive. Where there's probably equally dry places in Central Asia where they could store aircraft. But no, I'm glad he's done it. I think it's very good, and I hope you get lots of business, because those parked up aircraft always look amazing. I'd love looking at those pictures of Mojave and Victorville and all of that. It's just incredible.
Well, I once had an idea for a TV show where you went around one of those yards and picked out a few aircraft, because they all have their stories. I saw that feature that I think Channel 9, 60 Minutes, is that the channel that carries 60 Minutes? That TV show, the current affairs show. Mm-hmm. And it showed the last 767 being retired from Qantas and flown back to Victorville, flown to Victorville for storage, but ultimate. Though those Qantas ones might have found a new life. But anyway, they were leaving Qantas. The Kangaroo had been painted out. They had a all female crew fly up there. But she was walking around with the 60 Minutes guy around where all the Qantas aircraft are parked. And she said, "Oh yeah, that's 747." She said, "I flew the Queen out from London on that aircraft." Yeah. Everything's got a story, right? And I thought it was good to go around, identify airframes, and then find the attached stories. Some of them being involved in incidents. They've carried royalty or a star, or they all have their little stories and tell them, but never got past an idea stage. But there's always a story in one of those desert graveyard aircraft,
Yeah, especially some of the older planes they got there. It'll be amazing what they've done.
Yeah, well, you go through Tucson and the area next to David Monson, where they got the 707 airframes that were all bought up in the late 70s, early 80s by the US Air Force, and had the engines, turbofan engines, cannibalized off them. And I think the early models had the same slats and flaps and everything like that. So they were parts provider. But there's like 100 of them there. Pan Am, Braniff, old TWA. All those old airlines, the liveries are still on them. They were last time I went through there. It's quite amazing to see. Of course, missing the bits that were most favoured, that is the tall tails. Remember the KC-135 came out with a short tail? Well, they retrofitted them with all those old airliner, from that area. It's amazing to see. I've got some photos of that, actually. So Yeah, they all tell stories.
When I was in Mojave, I was surprised to see they had a whole lot of those RC-5 Vigilantes, and the A3, the Douglas, the Sky Warrior, that carrier-based plane with the underslung engines, and they were big,
Douglas
huge planes.
Yeah, I've seen one of them.
Yeah,
they got high wing, a couple of turbofan engines or turbojets hanging down off the wings.
Turbojets hanging off the wings. Yeah, big, just so big.
Yeah, big plane. Yeah. Even you get next to an F4 and it's big. You think this thing's firing off the freaking deck of a carrier. It's half the size of a 737 almost.
No, they're big. Yeah, they are they're amazingly big. There's an F4 at the Naval Officers Academy in Annapolis, Virginia, in Maryland, and they've got one on like a pedestal, and you go, "Juice, that is huge."
Yeah, they're not small.
Yeah. No.
We were going to talk about the Sea Vixen too, weren't we?
Yeah, we can talk about the Sea Vixen.
In our sort of aircraft of the moment. I might dial up a picture of it here, or you might want to bring it up on. Can you bring it up on your connection?
I can bring it up. Yeah.
Images. Here it is. Come on. Yeah, the Sea Vixen. Here it is. Oh my golly, what
The Sea Vixen.
What a hot looking plane, man.
Yeah.
That is one hell of an aircraft. Oh yeah, I'm looking at them now. Oh, that must be the prototype or something.
Yeah.
Look at that. Yeah.
It's a pretty good looking plane, and then I'll show you one of the later ones. Here's some air-to-airs from this is the Red Bull.
Oh, Red
Bull.
Bull.
They've lost the. No, that's not the Red Bull one, I don't think. But I think that's the one that got painted up in the Red Bull colours.
Right.
So
well,
is
the cockpit slightly offset?
Yeah, it's offset to the left because the observer sits in a sort of sunken down. You see that area. You see that there where the mouse is.
Yeah. That's
the hatch where the observer sat down underneath.
Oh,
They called it the coal hole, and initially they didn't even have a window in the roof. There was just a dark thing because the old radar. The old radar sets were just very dim cathode ray tubes, so they decided to keep it dark. Yeah. And so you can see the cockpit. They haven't even kept it upright. It's actually the whole thing's actually at an angle.
Yeah, look at that. It's at an angle.
Yeah.
Is that like standard? They were all like that.
They were all like that. Yeah. Typical sort of. And these things here, they extended the booms to give them more fuel.
Oh, so they did the wing take fuel? The wing looks pretty chunky.
Wing takes, yeah. I think only the inboard though. I don't think the outboard takes fuel. Right. The inboard takes fuel. The booms take fuel. 2 Avon engines. So if you look at the size of that thing, it's actually quite interesting. It's about half the size of an A320. I've actually, it's a little less than half the size of an A320. So an A20 is 37.5 meters long.
Yeah.
And one of these things is 15.5 meters. So it's a little less than half the length of an A320. It's got a 16.7 meter wingspan. So it's 55 feet wingspan, and an A320 is 35 meters wingspan. So it's about half the wingspan of an A320.
Gee.
It's got half the thrust of an A320, and it weighs 20 tons, whereas an A320 weighs 78 tons. So it weighs, less than a third of an A320, but it's got half the thrust. So it could get along 610, 620 knots. It could go supersonic in a dive. It was only armed with missiles, and of course, it's a follow-on from the fantastic Vampire and Venom, and New Zealand operated Venoms, didn't they?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can see the sort of like the genesis of it in there,
Yeah, and it turned out to be nice and compact because you got the double tail. You didn't have to have a big tail, so it kept the height low. The wings folded, and the nose, the radome, flipped back 180 degrees. So for a big plane, it actually stored up quite compact. And then the major benefit of that layout for the engines of the day was you had a very, very short jet pipe, which meant they didn't get friction losses. They weren't that powerful at the best of times. Although, I mean, that's the Avon. That's the same engine that was in the Canberra, the same engine that was in the Comet 4.
Yeah.
Which they actually, bizarrely enough, they still make the Avon because they use it as a stationary generator. The core of the Avon is still being manufactured. They made like 11,000 of them.
Incredible.
So yeah, a big plane actually, and very capable. When it came in. It was the late 50s, 1957, and was a match for pretty much anything of the day. Although there was a supersonic model put forward with afterburners and all that, which they didn't do, obviously. And anything else in those times, which is just incredible. They built about 140, 150 of them, and 15 years later, they were all out of service.
Wow.
Yeah, they lost a few. But
wasn't there a crash? Was it a Vixen that crashed at the Farnborough Air Show and wiped out a whole bunch of people?
I don't believe so. I thought the prototype crashed during flight testing. It fell apart in the air.
I mean, if you look it up, I think it may have been the Vixen, but there was a crash at one of the air shows, and it landed in the crowd and killed some people. It had also that Boy Wonder look. All those aircraft of that era had a real sort of look to them, didn't they?
Yeah, amazing looking. Yes, it was the prototype that crashed.
Right at the air show.
It fell apart in the air. Yeah, it came apart in the air. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. It's on film, I believe. The actual crash.
And they were good at that. I mean, the test pilots or display pilots in those days really did take their life in their hand. I mean, the Victor bomber, one of them crashed, fell apart in the air. The tail came off, which would have been quite alarming.
Well, remember the XB-70, the Valkyrie, collided with a camera ship or an observer aircraft. Might have been even an F4.
Yes. No, wasn't it a Starfighter a Delta Dart, I believe it was.
Okay.
And it got caught in the vortex and clipped the wing and destroyed it. But listen to this. This is how the Vixen crashed. Are we surprised? Following a supersonic dive and a fly past from 40,000 feet and during a left bank at about 450 knots towards the show's 120,000 spectators, the pilot pulled up into a climb. In less than a second, the aircraft disintegrated. The outer sections of the wing, both engines and cockpit, separated from the airframe. The cockpit with the two crew members still inside fell right in front of the spectators nearest the runway, injuring several people. The engines traveled much further on a ballistic trajectory. One engine crashed harmlessly, but the second one plowed into the so-called observation hill, causing most of the fatalities. The rest of the airframe fluttered down and crashed on the opposite side of the runway.
How many people were killed?
Killing 29 people and injuring 60.
Ooh, wow. Yeah.
And the structural failure was due to a design flaw in the wing's leading edge.
Right, that's how you find out, right?
Fixed it up and it went on into service. Yes. So we'll take this prototype and we'll dive it supersonic and then pull up in front of the crowd and oh yes, it just fell to pieces. That would have been a bit of a worry.
Oh dear.
But yeah, I'd heard about that crash. I didn't realize it was the Vixen. I should look at Wikipedia more. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But if you read this site, and I've said it before, but this Thunders and Lightnings site is actually really interesting because what you can do is you can go in and you can see the memories, and they talk about how the guys flew it and what they did and how much fun they had and all this type of thing. And some of the notes here are quite interesting. I flew one out to Singapore in 1962 and all this type of thing. Yes, they were never really used in combat, although they did cover the Aden incident, and they did a few other things, but they were never really used in anger. And after 15 years, that was it. And at the same time, you had the Sea Vixen, you had the Gloucester Javelin, which was a giant delta wing thing, which is relatively ineffective. But yeah, it's the British aircraft at that time. I mean, as were the American planes like the Delta Dart and the F-104 and all that. They had a lot of this. Yeah, today it's actually pretty boring, isn't it? Although it is quite spectacular when you see an F-18 go over, and I've seen a few of those go over here.
What was that big Corsair thing that went off the carriers with the wing box that folded up? The whole wing could be put in.
There was the Crusader and the Corsair. Yeah, they looked very similar. They were completely
maybe
different
the Crusader
planes.
was the earlier one, the bigger one.
Yeah, the A7.
Because I remember going to have a look at one of those at the Museum of Flight in Seattle, and boy, they're big. They were big too.
Yes,
I think John was the test pilot for that back in the day. He later became an astronaut.
Yeah, they were pretty cool looking planes as well. It was the F8 Crusader was the supersonic. Looked like a Corsair, but it was quite a lot bigger, and it had that variable incidence wing. The whole main wing was on a jack, so that's right. So the plane could point down. The wing would have the correct angle of attack, but the pilot could still see the carrier deck.
Right. Yeah, they're big.
Yeah,
I remember thinking that next to it. Were they one or two? I think they had two engines, didn't they? Have two engines?
No, one single engine. Single engine. Yeah, J57. So a big single engine.
Yeah,
a giant single engine.
Yeah. They were pretty big. Okay, well that's fascinating. I wonder what aircraft we'll look at next week, Martin. Another one of these classic British things, maybe. One of my favourites is the what do they call it again? The one that crashed on the motorway a few years ago in the UK.
The Hunter.
The Hunter, yeah, the Hunter. I like the Hunter.
Hunter, yeah.
That's a hot.
Or the Gannet.
Machine. Yeah, well,
the Gannet's cool.
The contra-rotating.
Yeah.
Prop thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was what were they? Observation aircraft.
Early warning.
Early warning, yeah.
Yeah, early warning planes. Yeah.
I've always been fascinated by contra-rotating props.
Oh, that's. I'd love to go and see one of those Tupolev 95 Bears.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's just an amazing plane. And you remember? I don't know. Remember I think it was called the Tupolev. Was it the 114?
Was the 114 the airliner? Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing, that thing.
That had the wings and engines of the Tu-95. And and it was like 250 seater or something, all maxed out.
It was big. It was big and it was fast. Yeah. And Aeroflot and JAL for a very limited period of time had a shared service to Europe from Tokyo over Russia using a plane painted up in both colors, Aeroflot and Japanese Airlines. Japan
I'd like to see that. Maybe search out that picture. I think Khrushchev, didn't he, turned up at when he went and banged the table at the UN that time. He turned up in the 114 and it blew everyone away,
Yeah, they had to get a special boarding steps for it because it was so high.
Yeah. Apparently it's a very smooth airliner, very smooth.
Yeah, but very noisy. The crew do say it's a very capable aircraft, but those props, just the tips of the propellers are exceeding the speed of sound, so it's apparently incredibly loud and very tiring because of that.
Yeah, it's sort of it's got that real distinctive sound, hasn't it? That sort of, well, not like a lawn
grinding.
But, grinding. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to see if there's a picture of a Tu-114 people getting on board with JAL airliner steps, but it seems to be in Aeroflot colours. But yeah, that's what you're talking about, I think. Boy, the bloody hot looking.
Yes, I was speaking to someone, and he said his granddad had served in PYB Catalinas, right? And the engineer's position was in the pylon, the wing pylon.
Oh, right.
Or the engineer could access the wing pylon during flight, and apparently that was pretty loud too, because you were basically behind sort of both propeller discs were inches away from your face when you were up there.
Wow.
And yeah, apparently that wasn't the favorite place to go while the plane was flying either.
It would be a hell of a noisy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and they went on missions, 15 hours.
Yeah, I think Qantas flew during the war, had a flight to Sri Lanka from Darwin using Catalinas.
Yes.
It was 21 hours non-stop.
And South Africa had a Catalina base in Lake St. Lucia, and they used to fly the other half of that leg. They used to fly to Sri Lanka and meet up with the Australian one. It was like a mail run.
Right.
So because that was like the halfway mark between South Africa and Sri Lanka, or South Africa and Australia. So they'd both fly up and fly down, once a week or something.
I see.
Yes.
Speaking of South Africa, Qantas have stopped flying 747s now to South Africa. No more 74s. And I think it's 787s now.
Okay. So that must be a completely different route, because I don't know whether they can fly as far south as the 74 did.
No, well, that's right. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, that's always been the problem with South Africa, because I remember when I did it and we flew out of Sydney, and we flew I was sitting on the right-hand side of the airplane, and I looked down and then I looked at the moving map, and I realized we were actually flying down the east coast of Tasmania. We were flying like pretty straight south.
Wow.
And we flew past Tasmania, and we flew down and we flew down and we flew down, and I looked out the window and there were icebergs, and I saw that the alternate airport, because they show you the closest airports on that map, the closest airport was Durban, South Africa. And we were like halfway through a 14-hour flight.
Yeah. Well, I remember flying from Auckland to Santiago last year, and boy, when you're at the halfway point, you're a long way out, man. You are a long way out.
And that was a 787, wasn't it?
Yeah, -9, yeah.
Yeah.
Rolls-Royce powered.
Yeah. But you got a few islands you could stop at, eh?
I suppose there's Easter Island, and theoretically you could get back to the Chathams. It's 5,200-foot runway there. I suppose you could land there if you really had to.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting why they got the fuel out there for it.
Well, yeah, but at least you still are a hell of a long way out over the ocean.
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
And you look on the map, and it seems like a long way. So anyway,
it is a long way.
I think back in the days when Aerolíneas Argentinas used to fly here, that was basically over the pole.
And that was what were they flying then? A340s?
747-200s first up. I think they had an SP for a while, and then it was A340 300s.
Yeah. I think they with those 4-engine planes, they can go a whole lot further south.
Yeah.
Well, once what's the ETOPS now on the A350 and the 787s? I mean, ETOPS it's crazy
about
now.
5 hours, isn't it?
300 minutes. Yeah, something ridiculous.
So that's going to get you. That's half the flight. Pretty well.
Yeah. So it's they're getting there.
Yeah.
I don't. I have a few friends who are petrified of that type of thing, but I'm figuring, if I'm in the plane and it goes wrong, mate.
Well, that's right. Chances are it won't. So even back in the day, did Qantas fly, or South African Airlines flew classics, 200s and 300s on that route too, did they?
Yes, 300s. I don't know whether the 200s ever went direct. I don't know. Because I remember when I was a kid.
I saw one leaving from Sydney once, and I wondered if it was going all the way, or they're going to stop at Perth or something. I don't know.
I think they stopped in Perth in those days. I mean, I remember when it was British Airways, when they got their first 400s. And I was a kid in South Africa, I think.
Yeah.
It was like a big deal because they could offer non-stop flights to the UK, because before that, in the old 74s, you had to either stop in Kenya or you had to take the SP, which went around the bulge of Africa all the way up.
Right.
And a lot of airlines used to stop in Nairobi.
Yeah. Wow.
But then the 300s, I think the 300s could go direct, couldn't they? I remember it was a big deal.
One of the flights I went up to the US from Auckland on Qantas, I think the last one I went on was a 300.
Okay.
It went direct, but they must have lightly loaded it because that would have been right at the end of their legs for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how far you can fly on an A320 now.
I know. Yeah.
You know?
That's right. Well, I wonder how many of Air New Zealand's A320s will get back in the air.
Oh, I don't. Yeah. Do you think they'll get rid of those first ones?
Well, there's talk of it, I think. Yeah.
Well, if they get rid of them, though, it's probably because they're not the right size anymore. They're probably a bit small.
Yeah, and they'll be coming up for major checks too, I would imagine.
Yeah, they will.
Because they'll be what, 15 years old now, some of them?
Bad time to sell old planes, eh? Well, you won't sell them all. They'll just
like those. Take them to Alice Springs, mate.
Yeah.
Leave them there for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't heard anything about Virgin, eh?
I was going to ask you about Virgin. Yeah. I see that Qantas and Virgin have stopped doing international flights again because the government subsidies have run out.
Yeah. So follow the money, mate. They'll.
So where's the sale at? Where's all that going?
No, I haven't really heard anything.
They hope to have that done by the end of this month. So there'd be a big announcement only a week or two away.
There's a lot of posturing going on, but I don't really see I don't really see what the point is of fighting over Virgin, because whoever buys it, it's just going to be a real pain, because you're going to have to deal with it's got too political. But there's really not much news about the Virgin thing. There's those two bidders. There's another bidder. Yeah. Let me have a quick look, because
anything more on Rex?
What's it saying here? No, they're boosting. No, there's really not much.
Yeah.
I guess maybe they're keeping it secret until they announce it, then we'll all be absolutely amazed with how clever they've all been.
Branson's still keeping his hat in the ring.
Yeah. Well, or one of the bidders is associated with a lot of Branson Airlines.
The Cirrus bidder. Isn't it Cirrus?
Yeah.
Or Cyprus, Cirrus.
Ooh, that's what I saw. I wandered down the airport the other day to watch Fokker 70 come in. I saw it on flight radar that the Fokker 70 was coming in, and I was in town, so I bolted down to the airport to watch it come in. And what was cool, talking about Cirrus, there was an SR-22 there, right next door to a little Mooney.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was cool. It looks pretty flash, the Cirrus, and the Mooney looks pretty cramped.
Yeah, well, the Mooney's still an old plane in terms of its fundamental design. It's a 50s airframe, isn't it? I think that Mooney.
Yeah.
So
they get up. They get up.
Oh, they were always fast. They were made to be fast. I met the head of Mooney, actually. One of the air shows I went to once. They were launching a new model, and it was a woman, actually, and she was a very impressive speaker. But I got to say, those Clampmeyers who built up the Cirrus company and brand, I think they sold out to Cessna in the end, didn't they?
I don't know. But no. I know who you're talking of. They're was it the Clampmeyer brothers who made that
SR-21?
Yes. No. There was another company which made it was they initially started as a kit-built plane, and not the Lancer, but a Glass Star or something. A Glass Air.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they turned it. They certified it, and Cessna bought it and sold it for a while, but I believe they've stopped now.
Okay, well, of Cirrus. So I just see. I know they got bought out. Oh, Aviation Industry of China.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, that does ring a bell now. Yes,
Aviation Industry General Aircraft. My golly.
So yes, they got bought out by the Chinese.
Yeah, but a great aircraft. I've done quite a bit of flying in a Cirrus. And they had the ballistic chute, of course, if you got into ultimate trouble.
Yeah.
You could come down in parachute.
Yes, if you get into a bad way, that's pretty handy.
Yeah, well, it saved a few people. Though apparently some people pulled the chute too early and got themselves into more trouble.
Yes, and there's actually a very interesting video that I'm looking for right now, and people should go and look at this. It's about a guy he flies bush planes and does an incredibly short takeoff and everything. And his one plane was this amazing, that Polish plane, the Wilga, or whatever they call it, Wilga. It's like a high wing stall plane. It's called the WILGA. Anyway, he took one of these and he changed the shape of the wing. He put a bigger wing on it. He put a turboprop in it, and he built this amazingly sort of capable bush plane. But he actually destroyed it. I don't know, about 3 or 4 months ago, he had an accident, and a gust of wind caught him before he even took off, and he sort of ground looped it and crushed the wing and everything. The guy's name is I'll put it up on the screen now.
I've got a picture here.
The guy's name is...
There it is.
This is the channel Mike Patty or Mike Patey.
Oh, yeah.
And so what he's decided to do is he's building this thing called Scrappy. So he's taking a Super Cub fuselage, or a couple of Super Cub fuselages that he's found that were damaged in crashes. He's cut them all up, bolted them all, welded them all together. He's got a huge eight-cylinder Lycoming engine with this massive spade prop on it, and he's building the ultimate piston, and he's building the whole thing himself. This video here shows the undercarriage that he's putting on. Here he was load testing the struts, and this video here, building a box for my rocket, that's where he's putting the ballistic chutes in, and he talks quite a lot about the ballistic chutes and the problem with them. Here's where he crashed Draco. That's what he called the plane, Draco. That's his Wilga. He turned into a heap at the end of the run. But if you want to see someone actually building a plane, this guy Mike Patey, it's really, really good, really interesting stuff. He's shockingly enthusiastic, which is kind of nice.
That's good for the entertainment.
Well, he's American, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that's cool. Good that we were able to see that, and you can see the picture on my monitor there of the aircraft you're talking about. Gosh, it's so Stoll looking, isn't it?
Yeah, but the one his has got like 32-inch tires, balloon tires on it. And they do crazy things. I mean, they're going along a lake and they're dipping the tires in the water and all this type of thing.
Right. Yeah.
And
I've seen those sort of shots. Yeah. Yeah.
And he put a 690 horsepower turboprop on the front. So the thing climbed like a helicopter.
Wow. I went for one of those Lancia planes at an air show, and it had the 700 horsepower turbine on the front of it. My golly, you wouldn't believe. We almost went up vertically. It was incredible, the grunt.
Yeah. Well, that guy Mike Patey, he's also done. I think he's also got a Glass Air or something like that where he's put a turbine on it, and he's done coast to coast records for GA aircraft. I think he's done a round the world flight. He does a lot of stuff, and maybe if I was slightly more enthusiastic about anything, I might have done something, but it's not going to happen.
I did a video back in the early 2000s for the Skytruck, which was the Western version of the PZL M28.
Oh yeah.
Which is a Stoll plane, and they marketed it with new engines and everything and avionics as a sort of like a secret ops Stoll aircraft. And my golly, you wouldn't believe how quickly that thing could take off.
I think the Marines took some of those, didn't they? I think the Americans did end up taking some, And
you could land, it could take 13 paratroopers and all jumping out the back because it's got a cargo door that opens up, and it could you could take off and land on a dirt road in the forest sort of thing. It's incredible.
Yeah, it is quite impressive what people can do if they need to.
I had to shoot it air to air over the Everglades, and I've got tapes of the footage, but we shot it from this this guy turned up. They said, "Oh, we got this guy who's going to fly the camera ship." It's a Cessna 152, I think it was, like one of those two-seater ones.
Yeah.
Anyway, which, I mean, they're not bad planes. They've got just as good performance as the bigger versions. But anyway, this guy turned up. I can't remember his name. He was a real character. He wore this hat. And the thing was in the worst shape you could ever imagine. Like the chair, the seats were loose. I mean, it flew fine, actually, when we got up flying in it. But I thought, oh, my God, this is dodjo. And he was just like a plane for hire, but bare minimum. We got some good shots, though, out of the he opened the window. That's right. He said, "Oh, just open the window." And he sort of like pushed it out, and it was a good idea because we got a nice clear shot. But that was a bit of a laugh. But that aircraft was super impressive on the stall, incredible, even with a load.
What are you going to do with all those tapes, Paul? You're going to have to do something with them soon. You're going to have to get them off tape, aren't you?
I got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours, probably thousands of hours of content on mini DV tapes. So I don't know how long they are good as an archive, but you make a very good point. They should really be digitized, shouldn't they?
Yeah. Well, you should chuck them all up on the interwebs.
Also, one thing that I want to look at again is my dad flew on a Mountain Cook 748, registration Delta Echo Sierra, ZKDES, from Christchurch all the way to London. And it was a delivery flight to one of the airlines based out of Liverpool, Emerald Airlines it was, and they had a 748 fleet, and this aircraft was almost rebuilt. The wing was rebuilt by the Mount Cook guys. They sold it, and a guy called Hornblow was a trader in the 748s, and the Air Nikon aircraft out in Nepal was 748s, and he provided basically the whole fleet of their aircraft. So he had a business going where he provided parts and servicing, and they flew that aircraft on the way to London via Kathmandu to give it more maintenance, right? Anyway, he filmed the whole thing. And it's great, flying into the Himalayas going past, Mount Everest, into Egypt and Pakistan and all these places, all the way up, Corfu, over the Pyrenees.
What did he film it on?
But on mini DV, Sony mini DV camera. Good quality, not 1080p or anything, but 720, 576, but good, nice, clear footage. And and a lot of footage, showing the aircraft being flown, and they even got him to fly the plane.
You should edit that up.
The autopilot crapped out, so they had to fly heading and altitude manually for hours on end, and they all did it in shifts. And he did his couple of hours or something, just maintaining the trim. He said it never missed a beat the whole way. Never missed a beat. The aircraft never. I mean, the autopilot had a problem, but apart from that, he said mechanically it just never missed a beat.
Tynes, were they Rolls-Royce Tynes?
No, darts.
Yes, darts. Sorry.
Yeah.
And then the YS-11 had the same engines, didn't it?
I think I did. F-27s as well. Viscount.
I actually watched a movie. You know that Japanese
Argosy?
The Argosy, yeah. You know that Japanese animator Miyazaki, who does the
Bell.
Yeah, he did. I really like his stuff. He does the Ponyo and a few other movies, and they've always been sort of fairy tale-y movies. But yesterday on SBS, they had a thing, Raising the Wind or Riding the Wind. And I started watching it. I only got in after about the first 5 minutes, and I started watching it. And it turns out it was a sort of a romanticized animated feature about the guy who designed the Mitsubishi fighters during the Second World War. It was about the rise of and it was his inspiration was Caproni, that Italian aircraft engineer. And the one thing about Miyazaki manga or cartoons is the incredible detail. And it was actually amazing to see how he applied this to the aircraft, because he was showing the aircraft that this guy was designing in exquisite detail. It was actually a really good movie. It was kind of weird, but it was actually quite entertaining. I ended up watching the whole thing. I saw a couple flying for a freight airline in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, right.
They were all parked up. And initially I thought they were Hawker Siddeley 748s. And then I realized, no, they're slightly different. And then I worked it out. No, they were the Japanese version.
And I think even there was an airline operating in Hawaii for a while that flew them too.
Okay.
Yeah. But they were quite reasonable size.
Yes.
I used to have a flight sim model of one too.
They had the same engine pod as the Hawker Siddeley. The sort of engine well ahead of the wing with a sort of bulbous fairing for where the undercarriage went into.
Yeah, I think on
that's why they look so.
On the 748 and the Andover and the YS11, and the Viscount, the cowls and the cells opened up sort of like flower sort of petals,
Yeah, no, just look up Miyazaki Mitsubishi and you should find out what that movie's called. It was strangely good.
Martin says strangely good, so it must be good.
Yeah. All right.
Well, I don't know if there's too much more to talk about. I mean, the other big airlines are, I guess, doing their things to configure and survive. Lufthansa is possibly laying off quite a few people, I see. I'm surprised a German company would do that.
Yeah. Well, I think at the moment they're all positioning themselves for the reopening, and this gives them a really good excuse to have a general clean out. It's being announced here every day. You're seeing it now. These companies that took hundreds of millions in bailouts from the government to keep people on, it hasn't actually stopped them getting rid of significant parts of their workforce.
Yeah,
and they're all using the COVID as an excuse.
I wonder what the work from home revolution is going to do. I know people who now are working from home. Companies quite happy about it. And what's that going to do for inner city CBD office prices?
Well, it was just announced today on the ABC. They were saying something like 45 to 52% of the people currently working from home don't want to go back to the office.
Yeah, and the companies don't want them back.
Yeah, I mean, a friend of mine's wife, she works down on the coast, and they live out west in Brisbane, and her drive to work's an hour and 20 minutes, and she's been working from home for the last 2 months, and it looks like she's going to be allowed to work from home until the end of September. I mean, she would take a relatively significant pay cut to be allowed to work from home, and she says she actually doesn't need to be in the office. She's the personal assistant to one of the senior managers there. And all she does is manage the phone and the diary. Well, not all she does, but what she does is manages the contact and the diary and does the daily planning. And the manager's generally not that often in the office. And everyone's really happy with the situations, but she's got to speak with her HR boss to see whether or not they're just going to insist that she goes back into the office, in which case she'll lose 3 hours of her day.
Yeah, which is a lot of time. And that cumulatively is a huge amount of time. The other thing is, having to take a pay cut to work at home, it's a bit rich because you're actually contributing your premises as a place of their business. So there has to be some recognition of that. Sure.
Actually, there is that. And actually there is that. And that's kind of what I said. Well, why should you take a pay cut? You're either doing the job to their satisfaction or you're not. If you're doing the job to their satisfaction and they're willing to pay you that much for it, then why should you take a pay cut? Oh, but she said, but it's so much more convenient for me. Well, so what if it's more convenient for you? That's okay. You don't have to pay for that convenience.
No. And she's like, it's a material value add for whoever the company is, because ultimately they're saving the square foot to accommodate that person in their rental requirements or whatever.
Yeah, I wonder what they'll do, whether or not she will have to go back into the office. I'm pretty sure they'll decide that she has to go back, because how would they manage her if she's not there? You see?
Yeah, well, that's the
Follow
thing.
the money.
You got to have the control, right? You got to have them there to be controllable. Can't have them out of sight. They might be enjoying themselves or finding too many ways to free up time for themselves. You can't have that.
Yeah, exactly.
I would.
Yeah,
really
yeah.
I was going to say, I'd really like to know the true. I mean, this goes for me too. It goes for everyone. But you're there for 8 hours a day. What is the actual average amount of daily work actually done?
Well, it's actually quite low. There's people done all these studies. It's surprisingly low.
Probably a couple of hours at the most.
Oh, actual focus time, and they say if you're in those open plan offices, it's probably less than that.
Yeah.
I think I read somewhere of a typical 7.5 hour work day, there's actual 2 hours 37 minutes work done or something.
Yeah. So basically the rest of the time is not working or looking like you're working or going off to get your lunch, morning tea, or having your smoko if you work for a transport company.
Meetings.
That's right. Auckland Transport. No, did I say that? Yeah. I do walk past there quite a bit, and there are quite a few smokers out the back, I've noticed, relative to other.
And a cluster of coffee shops around the entrance as well.
Well, that's right, and they've been empty, so they've really taken hits.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, people were saying that it'll be downtown eateries and clothing stores will be really badly hit if even 15% of the people don't go back to work, because that will be 15% that it'll directly affect all these places, and it'll affect the rents and the blah and the this and the blah. So yes, maybe something will come of all of this. We'll see. I doubt it.
When you shake the box, Martin, that's what happens. Things get shaken up. The box is being shaken right now.
Yeah.
Big time.
Things, yeah, possibly. Maybe they are. I just hope the airline industry recovers so I can get out of here.
Oh yeah. How long has you been stranded now?
3 months.
Yeah. Oh well, karma, isn't it?
Well, it gets even worse than that, because the company I work for looks like it's just gone bankrupt. So.
Oh great. Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I don't know if what you're doing is working from home. No,
unfortunately not.
That's right. Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, we'll see.
Anyway, so this is the last program with the existing Patreon address on it. From the next program, the program-specific Patreon page will be operating. So feel free, when we come next week, we'll have all the details of that. Feel free to support both Bring Our Birds Home, and there's some activity going on there. And if people want to go to the Facebook page, they'll see what we're talking about there. And there's us and our podcast, which we want to keep going and to hopefully increase distribution on. I think we're up to probably every episode gets an initial hit of about 2,000, maybe just a few more than that, listens and views. So that's not too bad. It's growing.
And the audio gets quite a number of listens. And interestingly, I can tell you, at the moment, I think the top 10. Top 10's Australia. First one's Australia, then New Zealand, then the USA. So 22% Australia, 18% New Zealand, 15% United States, 13% UK, wow. 10% Canada.
It's so predictable. That's 5 eyes right there.
Sweden is up there. Sweden, Poland, Ireland, and Thailand. Myanmar's fallen off the list this week. Thailand's pretty consistent, as is Sweden for some reason.
Wow. Okay. Well, it's far and wide.
Yeah.
Well done, Sweden.
Well done, Sweden. Yeah.
Oh, we're getting ready for the second wave here, Martin, so I hope you're going to be all right.
No, I'll be fine. I'll be fine.
Yeah. Just wear that face mask, rubber gloves, and and stay at home which you don't. Well, you do have one, don't you? You're not
Yeah,
in the
I
back
have a
of the
place
ute
to
these
stay.
days.
Yeah, yeah, I could always go camping. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
beautiful
that's
out
right.
here.
Well, here's the
Yeah.
sad thing. I'm walking home tonight. I walked past. This is no. I got to mention this because it does make it real. I walked past, and it's a reasonably nice street in CBD of Auckland. I saw this woman sitting with a child on this little concrete sort of barrier thing by one of the university buildings with a little kid. And I thought, well, what's going on here? And then I looked over to my right, and up against the curb was a car. And it wasn't a bad car, but there was a guy in there cleaning the teeth of one of the kids. And I think the mother was attending to one of the other kids. They were obviously living in a car
Mm.
because all their equipment was in there. And while I thought, well, there could be worse places to be stuck in because at least you can seal it up and keep it warm and it's mobile, I thought that's if what it looked like was what I thought it was, it made me feel sad. It really did.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
I mean, those
That's not a
parents
good
are
thing.
still doing the best they could. You could tell. You could tell. You could tell.
Mm.
But I mean, they had enough to have a reasonable car, but God knows what had happened to the accommodation. But that's what they were doing, and it made me feel sad.
Mm. Yeah, that is sad.
No one should have that situation. And when it gets back to what
No.
we were talking about before, it's not hard to create affordable housing to accommodate families like that. It's not difficult. It's not even that expensive, actually, depending on how you do it. But it's just not done, and that's sad.
Well, that's got nothing to do with it. Of course, it's easy and it's not that expensive, but it doesn't preserve the housing market, which is what it's all about. I mean, I won't go on about this for long, but the very fact that they haven't managed to build any houses under their much vaunted 100,000 houses in 10 years plan is absolutely pathetic.
Well, it's you could argue it was a bit of a con, and it's
Well,
not good.
it is a bit of a con. There's no argument. It's absolute bullshit.
And you're conning people who, like the people I just mentioned, and that's really bad. And there are people protesting in the street at the moment for certain causes. Fair enough, but how about that cause?
Yes,
Because that's directly just round the corner, and there's
it
nothing I
affects
can
everybody.
do. Nothing I can do,
No.
except feel sad about it. Anyway.
And pay your taxes.
Yeah, well, I'd be quite happy if it had better results. But anyway, I mean,
Yeah, pay your taxes and ask why the hell the taxes aren't paying for the things that are needed. But no, anyway, that's a whole other story. Yes, all right.
all right. So let's leave it on that note. It's probably getting a bit late in Roma to be out now.
Yeah. Oh, it's just things are just getting started in Roma at 9:30, mate.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well, the lights are still on behind you.
I can easily hear the cows bellowing down at the stockyard. So
Right.
tomorrow's a big day, I guess.
Well, good luck,
Yeah.
and we'll
Hell
talk
yeah,
again this
thank
coming
you.
week.
Yes, we will.
Sleep well in the back of the ute.
Yeah. No, she's a bit too cold for that tonight.
At least you can read because you got lights.
I've got a lot of light. I've put a lot of load lights on the back of this thing. Yeah, and I've got this huge 32-inch light bar on the front now, so it goes down the road like yeah. It
Oh,
looks
wow.
like the back of the Millennium Falcon.
People think you're a UFO.
Yeah, it's bright, eh? It's bright, but you need it. You really need it. There's so many kangaroos around.
Right. I suppose they need to see you come.
Well, I got bloody ultrasonic whistles stuck on the bar on the front and anything to avoid hitting the damn things because they take a mess of a car, eh? Jeez, they hit a car, it doesn't look good.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's no bull bar. Yeah, I don't have a bull bar yet. I'm looking for one, but this is not a big truck. And the bull bars, even if you have a bull bar, if you hit a roost square on, and it comes up over the bonnet and through the window, a bull bar is not going to help you. And even with a bull bar, it can still bend the chassis rails.
Crikey.
Yeah, they make a hell. I saw one I saw a car recently that got smashed by one. It was a Kia Sorento or something. Oh my God, it made a mess of it. It just crushed the whole front left-hand corner. And I saw a car about 2 months ago that had hit a black cow in the dark. The other car was like a meter shorter.
Wow.
It just destroyed it.
Dark. You're just how are you?
Yeah, that's they. And it hadn't killed the cow. The police were actually dealing to the cow when I drove by the accident. They were just about to stop the road so they could shoot the cow and drag it off because it was obviously not in a good way. Anyway.
All right. Okay. Well, go safely then.
Yes, thank you.
And we'll be back again within the week. Paul Brennan in the bunker in Auckland and
Martin Oakes on a road in Roma.
See you later.
See ya.